In today's world, superhero team-up and crossover movies have become a staple in media, with different studios taking their own approach based on their franchise. And while some work better than others, there is no denying that sometimes audiences are looking for a fresh perspective, especially with the so-called superhero fatigue in recent years. A perspective that breaks from the traditional tropes and cliches, and the one that presents a new story in a new light, going beyond the already established norms. And this fresh perspective is what gives us the team-ups between more morally grey characters, such as the Suicide Squad and its newly released Marvel counterpart, Thunderbolts. Both movies are, however, pretty different from each other, besides the concept of a team controlled by the government and consisting of anti-heroes and villains, who end up being more heroic in their own way. And in this video, I decided it would be interesting to compare both of those movies, and see which one works better as an anti-hero type story. So let's get straight into it. We all love a good anti-hero story, but the story is only as good as its character. Before we start, just in case, this video will contain spoilers for both the Thunderbolts and the Suicide Squad. I will be using the 2021 version of the Suicide Squad for this, because, let's be honest, it's way better in every way than the 2016 version. Now let's get into the characters. James Gunn's Suicide Squad is more of a soft reboot of the 2016 movie, introducing mostly a completely new cast of characters who have not previously appeared in other movies, aside from Rick Flag and Harley Quinn, who also appeared in Birds of Prey, which was pretty much her solo movie. At the time of its release, the movie had only minor references to the late DCEU, basically taking place in its own little bubble, which is probably a good thing, since it does give more creative freedom standing on its own. On the other hand, Thunderbolts, of course, being tied to the ongoing MCU, brings together a cast of returning characters, who we met in a bunch of other projects. Yelena Belova, Black Widow's sister and one of the main characters, who we met in Black Widow movie, along with her dad, Red Guardian, who also returns in this movie as part of the team, basically the Russian version of Captain America. After that, Yelena makes an appearance in the Hawkeye show, where she hunts down Clint believing he killed her sister. Around that time, she gets approached by Valentina, and gets sent on different missions by her. We have the return of John Walker, now going by the US Agent, who was introduced in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier show. John became the next Captain America after Sam refused to take the mantle, picked for his numerous fire achievements and reaching nearly perfect human physique. John later on took the Super Soldier serum. However, after a fight with the terrorist group the Flag Smashers, where his friend was killed, he chased after one of the terrorists, publicly executioning him, and so was taken the mantle from him by the government. At the end of the show, he's also approached by Valentina, becoming known as the US Agent. Then we have Bucky, who's an OG at this point, appearing in a ton of projects. I might make a separate video about him down the line, analyzing his arc, because he definitely has one of the best character transformations in the entire MCU, and I think it's something worth looking back at. His Winter Soldier arc ended pretty nicely in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and he did cameo in Captain America 4 right before the Thunderbolts. Next is Ghost, Ava Starr, the villain from Ant-Man and the Wasp, who gained her powers due to the accident involved in the quantum realm, gaining the ability to become intangible due to the quantum energy, but because of her condition, she was also slowly dying. She was trained as a SHIELD operative, and had a suit developed for her to contain her abilities, and by the end of the movie, she gets cured. And of course we have Taskmaster. Yeah, there is really not much to say, the character was just completely wasted in the MCU, given the character's potential, which is upsetting, but I guess kind of expected due to the lack of her in the marketing for this movie. Hopefully they bring the real Taskmaster at some point. Now as such, each of these characters already went through some type of development before the Thunderbolts, which gives us an idea of what kinds of journey each of them has been on before they went through this movie. With the Suicide Squad, it's a bit different, with the characters introduced being mostly new. For this movie, James Gunn once again does what he did with Guardians of the Galaxy, taking a group of lesser known characters and making them likable in their own way, which already makes this film work better than its 2016 counterpart. And even though most of the characters don't have previous appearances, the film does a great job at establishing the main cast, their personalities and arcs, in the runtime that it gets, mixed in with some good team chemistry, making them feel interesting and relatable. This movie puts Bloodsport, a skilled mercenary, as a central character, showing things mostly from his perspective, and his arc as the reluctant leader who he eventually becomes. The team also includes Peacemaker, King Shark, Redcatcher, Polka Dot Man, and Harley Quinn, who has her own little arc in the film, but it's not too relevant to the overall plot. Everyone here brings their own to the table, either it's comedic relief, more grounded approach, or an emotional connection, and we'll see how in a minute. Alright, so now that we know who these characters are, let's talk about how the movies actually use them. The reason anti-hero stories often work so well is because they give us flawed characters that feel grounded, while also offering unpredictable dynamics if you combine a group of characters like that in the same story. Both movies share a similar structure, a group of misfits who have to work together to defeat a greater threat. In Suicide Squad, it's Starro, an alien starfish conqueror who mind controls people. In Thunderbolts' case, it's Sentry, or just who is the second main character of this movie, alongside Yelena, and definitely one of the strongest characters in the MCU that we've seen yet. He's basically an overpowered version of Superman, but with a darker side. And even though the premise is similar, both movies execute the idea differently. Suicide Squad in its true fashion emphasizes how expendable the team is, and uses dark humor to subvert traditional tropes, which is especially evident in the beach opening scene, which immediately sets the tone, with characters just dying left and right. The film leans more into satirical absurdity and chaos, which works pretty well for a story like this, without relying much on their properties. As for the main cast, let's take Bloodsport as an example. Now, to understand why he is central to the story, we need to put things into perspective, something that both movies do a lot. For instance, it's through his eyes we see all the craziness going on around him, the kind of team he has to lead, but it also provides for emotional moments. It's through his perspective that we learn Ratcatcher's story about losing her dad, which then directly emotionally connects to his complicated relationship with his own daughter, shown earlier in the film, as such in a way making Ratcatcher a reflection of his daughter, which then later on brings a different side of him, influencing his decisions in the third act. And in both films there are quite a few moments like that create some genuine connection between characters, which makes them feel more like a team, despite how unlikely it seemed at the start of the movie. Another part worth mentioning is the rivalry between Bloodsport and Peacemaker, which is probably one of the most entertaining parts of the film, with Peacemaker himself being one of the best characters, and starting his own show now, receiving 2 seasons after his appearance in Suicide Squad. And honestly, it was a great move. John Cena gives an amazing performance, and Peacemaker's character became way more popularized, especially after all the season 2 hype, and of course the famous intros. But again, it's things like this that create tension, and shape the dynamics between characters. Thunderbolts at its core, however, is more of a heartfelt story, about family, teamwork, and most importantly, mental health. And this is exactly what makes this movie relevant to the viewer. This is what makes it relatable. And I think this sets the Thunderbolts apart. A message is trying to send. A message about mental health. Using Sentry and Void as a metaphor for mental health is definitely one of the best decisions this movie made, considering the cast of the characters they picked, who each more or less have their own personal struggles. Bucky is probably one of the best examples of this, as we've been following his journey the longest and seen what he's been through. And then we have someone like Yelena, who, like I mentioned, is a central character in this, and you could even argue that this is basically her solo movie. Here we see her continue to struggle with her identity and the loss of her sister, a storyline that's carried from the Hawkeye show. But it's also her who we see step into the void first. It's from her perspective that we see most of the third act, as she travels through her mind to confront herself, her fears and her most traumatic experiences. Something we don't see through the perspective of other characters as much when they enter the void. Which I think would have been kind of cool if we saw each character's perspective through individual flashbacks with them facing their fears and some of their darkest moments. I feel like it's a big missed opportunity. I'd really like to see something like that. Even though, for example, with characters like Bucky we already know a lot about, I think someone like John Walker would have really benefited having scenes with more of his flashbacks, because I genuinely think he's one of the most interesting characters introduced in the recent years to the MCU, and he's got a lot going on for him. He wasn't a perfect Captain America, but he's really a complex and interesting character, and it would have been great to see more of his journey and struggles. Maybe it's his training, or his time in the military, or something like that.
I lived my life by your mandates. I dedicated my life to your mandate. I only ever did what you asked of me, what you told me to be and trained me to do, and I did it. And I did it well.
And although not everyone has a full circle arc in this movie, characters do work together pretty great. Some characters have more developed personalities like Ghost, some find a new purpose like Red Guardian, who is now part of something bigger, a team, which he's been the most excited about out of everyone else.
We are the Thunderbolts!
But the point I'm trying to make here is, what makes Thunderbolts different and compelling as an anti-hero type story is that it sends a bigger message, something that the Suicide Squad doesn't really have. Don't get me wrong, Suicide Squad does have its moments to make the characters fully relatable. Things like Polka Dot's man having an abusive parent, or Bloodsport's strained relationship with his daughter, but it does lack a consistent message that can make this story deeper. Which, to be honest, isn't necessarily something a team like Suicide Squad needs, because it's more chaotic in nature after all. But it would be a good addition in any case. And if something like the concept of redemption in Thunderbolts is presented through facing personal fears, in Suicide Squad not everyone gets a chance to be redeemed. Now to the final thoughts. Each of those films work pretty good as standalone stories, not really relying too much on their existing franchises. And that is honestly pretty refreshing, because in recent years it feels like there is a lot of over-reliance on interconnected projects, which can be good in theory, but can also confuse the average viewer just as much. Neither film is perfect, but they don't need to be. Those are stories about messed up individuals working for a common cause, but end up bonding in ways we never thought did. And some turn out to be more similar than others.
I have these good days, you know, where I feel invincible.
Are you sure?